Good Vibrations.
Welcome back to Good Vibrations, and I've got a first-time guest today, although it is a guy that I've heard speak a couple of times at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia, where we were both speakers in 2015 and 2017, I believe. So we're crossing over to British Columbia, Canada, to speak to David Whitehead. Welcome on, mate.
Hey, Mark, how's it going, man? Glad to be here. And yes, I do remember those Free Your Mind events, and I learned a lot from your talks, and I love your show, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Well, likewise, brother. And I feel this show is quite overdue. We should have done this before, but we'll set that straight today. Many things to talk about. I've heard some of the output that you've produced this year amidst these challenging times in which we live, and I felt that there were a few topics that we should get our heads together on. So, first of all, your talk at Free Your Mind was all about martial arts disciplines and how they can be applied to everyday life and the overall topics of self-improvement and self-mastery. And there's much more of that on your website, dwtruthwarrior.com. And on the website, it states, "The basis of my work is founded on a sincere pursuit of truth wherever it may lead, with an emphasis on facing and conquering fear and self-imposed limitation, which often get in the way of our physical, mental, and spiritual development." So, in these challenging times in which we're all living, these are skills and qualities that people will find themselves needing more than ever. And I wanted to get some tips from you on how people can look after themselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And maybe we should do those three in reverse and start with the spiritual element of it. So maybe you could start with some of your insights into that, David.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's so good. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about in retrospect, that I felt the need to bring that talk out. I'm trying to think of which year I started doing it at Free Your Mind, but I've been talking about this for a long time because I grew up training in martial arts since I was 9 years old. It changed my life. It really saved me from another life path where I had many opportunities to go down some unsavory routes in my life, as I'm sure many people can attest to. And we all need that balancing point. We need good guides in our life, not cult leaders and dictators, but guides, teachers, colleagues, people that can inspire you. And for me, a lot of those influences came from reading books and reading the philosophy sections in the back of those martial arts books that I would go to check out in the library or whatever. And what always really pulled me in was that it was the thing about martial arts that attracted me was the thing that was missing in me when I was younger, which I didn't have a lot of self-esteem when I was younger. I didn't have that confidence. I grew up in a very chaotic environment and, a lot of crazy stuff going on in my youth. And so when I would see these performances of martial artists and I would read the philosophy about it, it just appealed to me because in it was as if I was deficient in some kind of a nutrient. And that nutrient had to do with consciousness and with spirit more than anything else. And that's sort of the foundation of it. And in the martial art practices, they have their different practices and concepts for how to bring forward your best self, bring forward that fighting spirit, that part of you that you suppress most of the time, because most of the time you're not in a chaotic combat situation. And so, we keep all of that, stored away for times like this. But the problem is, I think a lot of people run into, and this is what I ran into, was that when challenge would strike, I didn't have, early on, I didn't have all the foundational principles in me and the knowledge points and the practice and the training to call forward that warrior spirit when I needed it. And so I realized that it wasn't when I was training these martial art moves, it wasn't just about the moves and whether you could knock someone out with one punch or anything like that. It was more about, could I face myself? Could I face my own demons? Could I face my own fears, my inhibitions, the self-doubt and all that kind of stuff? And so that to me became a definition to start with about, spirituality. It's that inner core, the capital self or the capital S self, the kingdom of heaven within, however people want to call it. Some people would say, it's that part of God in you. In Japan, they talk about the concept of ki. In China, they use the idea of chi, and it's this idea of energy and how to use it. And so that was what really, really opened my eyes when I was younger and kept me training martial arts right up to this very day, was that it became a practice of using the body and the mind to activate the spirit. within you, and to really channel it forward and bring forward all of those different parts of us that we suppress. Because especially look at the time we're living in, a lot of us are suppressing how we really feel, what our opinion really is. We're suppressing our voice because of the will of the crowd, everybody around us, the influences around us, the public shaming, and so we censor ourselves constantly, and it becomes subconscious. And so for me in martial arts, because you can't lie to yourself, you can't go and stand before some black belt and start sparring and lie to yourself that you're better than you really are. You either can do it or you can't do it. And if you can't do it, you learn the practice of how to get yourself in a place spiritually first in order to be able to challenge the other aspects of yourself, to grow to that challenge. And so that became a really good, I guess, sort of, it was like the microcosmic idea that you could apply to life. And that's the ideas that I apply to the work that I do on Truth Warrior with Unslaved, which is another podcast that I do with Michael Tessarian over at unslaved.com. We talk about a lot of these principles as well. And when you bring it all together, and I think back to some of those talks I did and the information I was trying to share with people, I've just realized how relevant it is to what's happening. And so now I've been trying to use that as a foundation for, as I share, the news, the headlines, what's going on, my opinions, bringing on guests. The foundation of the work I do comes from that spirit of warriorship.
Sure. Have you found yourself getting stressed out and anxious by the stuff that's going on this year, or have you kind of mastered these disciplines to the point that you're able to suppress those emotions from coming through? Or is it a case of allowing them to come through and then dealing with it?
Yeah, it's more of the latter, Mark, because I would like to sit here and say, oh, I've been just this perfect Zen Buddhist or whatever, but it's not true. I have my little issues as well, as everybody does. It was a sad fact. I really got thrown for a loop at the beginning of this because we had just moved to our new place like a week before they locked everything down. As soon as the lockdown happened, I realized that my martial arts business was not going to survive for long. And it was about a month after that the gym that I was working with decided to close permanently. Then the government basically took the land and then they turned it into a homeless shelter. So it's a story. And I was very sad about that I had lost my business there. And then not long after that, my mother passed away, not from the virus. She had long-term health issues, and I made sure they didn't put COVID on the death certificate, by the way. But it was a hard time, right? The foundation of when all this happened in my own personal life, a lot of things got thrown awry. And so the one thing about what I'm talking about with this, and I try to share this with people, is a lot of people look at this martial art philosophy as this image of perfection that we see by the media, that you have to be this solid rock where you express no emotion and you're perfect at everything. You never make mistakes. The reality is the martial artist, the person that's been at that process for their whole lifetime, or as long as they have, it's more about knowing how to deal with yourself when you are down, right? It's like, there's an old saying, it's like you want to be the best in the world on your worst day. And what that is it's not necessarily about being better than or lesser than. What it is it's a statement to yourself that, you're realizing life is a process, that you're going to deal with all kinds of emotions and challenges. You're going to have up days and down days, just as you do in your training. In your training sessions, you go in some days and you're the hammer, and then the next day you go in and you're the nail. And that's how life is. So I feel like the martial art concept is more about reality and being realistically grounded first. And from there, then you will learn how to rise to the occasion. And the more you rise to these occasions, I feel like you never forget that you were strong enough to deal with a past challenge, so you can apply that to whatever current challenge you're facing. So that was my motto, was that I had definitely some real dark nights of the soul. I would sit out on my porch at night, and there were times when I would just, I didn't even know where it was coming from, but I would just start, crying, and I would feel like, what the hell's happened to me right now? And I realized there was a lot that I was suppressing to be strong for my family, to be strong for the work that I do. And I wasn't dealing with myself. I wasn't necessarily practicing what I was preaching to the best extent. And I went, okay, I've got to take a breath. I've got to take care of myself. And I remember just taking like a 2-week break where it was every day out in nature. I was training in my basement, teaching my girls, taking them out, focusing on the family, recharging. And once I did that, then I was able to come full force back into my work. And I honestly have to say that ever since this lockdown started and I really kicked up my show and the work I was doing, I feel I was able to produce my best work thus far, simply because it was through challenge, through struggle, not just with what was going on in the world, but what was happening inside of me. So, I'm definitely just like everybody else, going through my own challenges. And I actually think that's what this period of time is we're seeing the macrocosm of what's happening collectively across this planet right now, where it's as if we're in some kind of an energetic zone where all of us are being called to address past issues, address the places within ourselves that we've sort of ignored. And it's all about bringing everything to the surface, seeing it for what it is, and dealing with it. And I find it very interesting that all the astrologers I've brought on, all the people from different angles, have all been sort of talking about that aspect of it. And so I feel like it fits rather nicely. And it's been how I've actually personally experienced this whole situation.
Well, I'm right there with you on so much of that, brother. I've had some troubled days and some dark nights of the soul myself this year. But also I've learned to appreciate nature so much. I was saying to you off air there that we moved home in June of this year, and I now live out in a rural area surrounded by fields, surrounded by beautiful countryside. And every evening through the summer, I've just been out for a long walk and just really connecting with nature, connecting with God, just doing some soul searching. And I've really noticed just how beautiful the spring and summer has been this year. There's been fewer chemtrails here in the UK than usual. I can't say they've disappeared completely, but we've had a lot of blue skies, and we've had the most incredible year for sunny, warm weather. It's kind of ironic in such troubled, turbulent times.
Right.
The weather has just been so wonderful and beautiful, and I've just learnt to appreciate nature and connect with it so much this year. And it seems the circumstances we've been facing have brought that around in an ironic kind of way.
Oh yeah, and I can say the same thing. It's been such a contrast where I've been inside on the computer looking at the world melting down and all this stuff going on, and then I go outside, still chirping, and there's still deers wandering around my backyard, and it's so ocean. I'm very fortunate to live where I live. Take my girls we go bike riding on some of these trails around here, and then we did a little bit of camping, and then I come back and back to the war room, back to work. Oh my God, what's happening? Is this the end of the world? And then back out in nature, and it's just been this contrast of light and dark, craziness and serenity. And I've spoken to so many other people just like yourself who share a very similar experience. And I think that maybe part of that is us seeing it, but another part of it is that is we're getting a very, very clear definition of the duality of life and the principles of nature embedded throughout everything that we're engaging in. And so that's why I've been personally, just like yourself, going back to nature with conscious intention. I'm not just walking around, oblivious to what's going on, checking my phone. When I go out, I leave the phone, and I'm out just observing, watching the hummingbirds, I've been really paying a lot of attention to the moon cycles lately, just getting used to seeing, oh, look, it's a quarter moon, full moon, here it is, and looking at the different weather patterns and then talking about it with my girls. And, and that's what you need to do. If there's any recommendation I can give to people is, don't just notice the negative things that are happening, right? There are negative things, and the other extreme is don't ignore those things. We can't ignore them and repress it. But notice also the positive things that are happening around us, right? And even the fact that, for example, I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm getting contacted by people all over the world right now, literally all over the world. I'm using Google Translate every day to translate messages from people. Yeah. And I'm just seeing this incredible energy in people. And even though it's negative and it's about something negative, like all the lockdowns and all the COVID stuff, it's actually changing a lot of people in a positive way. And I think that's what it takes. It's think about it. If we didn't have this lockdown period, if 2020 was a normal year, a lot of people wouldn't have woken up, and other things that were not being looked at would have just gotten worse and worse and worse. Remember that we're not just suddenly in a time where all of a sudden these governments lost their mind and started taking away people's rights and freedoms, and the media didn't just suddenly start spinning information and scaring the hell out of people needlessly. This has been a problem since before I've been alive. I spoke about this with elders in my family and people that I know who've been around here a lot longer than me. And we've often talked about how long in the making these steps that are being taken have been in the works. And so what I try to say to people is just remember that because of this challenge we're facing, because of all this darkness that's coming to the surface, it's what is needed to get people's attention so that they can see that we've been having some things rotting beneath our feet for quite some time that need to be addressed. And that is true spirituality. True spirituality is not avoidance of challenge or avoidance of trauma or corruption or evil. True spirituality is shadow work. It's inner work. It's psychological work. It's body work. It's energy work, and it takes that spine of a warrior to get through that, so that's just how I see it. And I feel like this is the ultimate time to be alive as a human being. And I think we're going to see, yes, probably some terrible things, but we're also going to see some incredible things. And we may just be on the precipice of one of the greatest moments in human history, if I dare say so. So that's just where I'm feeling right now with this.
Well, that's right. 2020 could be our worst nightmare or our best ever opportunity for evolution and growth and moving forward. And like you, I feel that this year I've been prompted to put out some of my best work. I've certainly been on it 24/7. And I'm mainly known for exposing the machinations of the entertainment industry, and particularly the corporate music industry. That's what most of my talks and my books and my radio shows have been about. But this year, I've done little to none of that, because in all good conscience, I've just felt that my energies and my efforts have had to be channeled into communicating the truth of what's really going on in the world and this whole scamdemic that everyone's being subjected to. And it's definitely paid dividends, because in March of this year, I had about 10,000 subscribers to my YouTube channel. I'd been limping along with that number for quite some months. And when I started turning my attentions to the COVID, corona bollocks, as I call it, and I started doing my weekly videos and really expressing how I felt. I did this one particular video in April, and I was in my car, just like you are now, and I just exploded and went into a furious rant, because it was in the early days of the lockdown, and we just had all these ridiculous, absurd measures introduced in the shops where you have to queue outside, stand behind bits of tape, follow one-way systems round, and I'd just come back from that kind of experience in my town, and I just lost my mind, and spontaneously put the camera on, sat in my car and just vented. And I put out that video, and it connected with so many people. I got communications from all over the world. My YouTube subscriptions went up to 37,000. And
Wow.
I was getting emails every single day from people all over the world saying, thank you. You have articulated and expressed exactly how I feel about this situation. You've put it into words, and we found great value in what you've put out there. And I know that I've personally reached, it's definitely thousands. It's probably tens of thousands of people. I've had emails saying, you've opened my eyes to how the mainstream media lies to us, how governments are traitors, how they don't have our best interests at heart. Thank you for this material. And I know that I've reached that number of people because they tell me. And I don't say this to blow my own trumpet. I don't say it out of ego. I say it to illustrate the point that if I can have that reach and if I can have that effect on people by channeling my efforts and my will into that kind of work, then anyone can be doing this. It's a wonderful legacy to reflect on as we get to the end of our physical lives. If we can leave this realm of existence with the world in a better, more positive, more beneficial place than it would have been if we'd never incarnated into it, then we can feel that our lives have had value. But I do like the fact that you refer to yourself as a truth warrior, and that's the title of your website, because that's what I feel the likes of us are, that are disseminating this empowering, inspiring information in these times. We are warriors, and we are at war. This is a war between good and evil, quite demonstrably. And a hobby horse of mine these past few months has been bemoaning the lack of real men that we seem to have in the so-called Western world in these times. So I like to think that if this COVID stunt had been pulled in previous generations, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, I think that a militia of truth warriors would have risen up and gone into battle against the tyranny and the injustice and the assault on our rights and freedoms that we're all experiencing, and stepping fully into that sacred masculine self-defense principle, fighting on behalf of all in the community. But we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is that males, it's a generalization, but I think many would agree with the point. Males seem to have been neutered, they seem to have been weakened, and in many cases they seem to have been feminized. And this is brought home to me when I'm out and about and I see big, strapping, hulking, physically strong men, covered in tattoos, shaven heads and all this, but they're cowering behind masks. And they're complying with all the restrictions, standing behind the bit of tape, waiting till the junior on the door of the shop tells them they can go in. And I'm thinking, these people should be warriors. This should be a militia of real males, authentic males, fighting for the rights and freedoms of all in society. But instead, they're just complying with tyranny and behaving like cowards. So that's a bit of a rant, and like I say, it's a bit of a personal hobby horse of mine, but I have a feeling you might feel the same way about that.
Yeah, and first of all, let me talk. I just want to say to you, congratulations on the reach that you're having, because I will tell you this, I will bet my bottom dollar that your account and my account and so many other accounts are shadow banned, they're highly censored. I've had a YouTube channel since 2008. And I've been producing work for a long time, and it took me forever to get past like 18,000 subscribers, and I had to limp along just to get that. Even though I'm interviewing top tier guests from around the world where other people can pull them on, and these are guys that have like millions. And it's not about whether or not you or I have these types of followers, but what it is it's a clear indication that there is censorship in the media about this message and people like ourselves. We've seen all the articles about how anybody challenging the government line on COVID is just deemed a conspiracy theorist, and then they pack a whole bunch of stuff into that term, as they've been doing forever since the CIA invented it. And sure. It's
COVID denier is the new conspiracy theorist.
Now there's the denier thing, right? It started with the Holocaust deniers, and then the whatever denier you want to have. You get climate denier, vaccine deniers. And denier. And when I was actually interviewing a friend of mine who had fled Romania and another that had fled Venezuela to come to what they thought was going to be a free country, they had said that they use different types of terms there. They would use like traitor, these are traitors, right, of the cause, of the revolution or whatever. And they always have these terms to put people into baskets, so that nobody will go and, the people that aren't paying any attention won't go and listen to them. They'll think, oh yeah, I'll just go listen to Anderson Cooper and whoever's on the CBC or the BBC, and they will be telling me the truth. And this guy, Mark and Dave, those guys, they're just conspiracy theorists. So, so they hit you on two fronts. They don't allow your content to actually reach the people who do like your content and actually subscribe to it. And they also don't allow it to reach out further. And then the media is constantly attacking people as ourselves without any foundation. And now they've brought in the fact checkers and on, and we'll get to all that stuff, as I'm sure you've covered. But just to swing back now to your point about what's happened to men, I've been questioning this for a long time. And I also feel the same about women, to be honest with you. I feel like it's the human race in general. And I think there's a unique way that these social engineers, propagandists, governments, whatever, the media, that they've attacked the foundation of masculinity in our society, and they've attacked the foundation of true femininity in our society. And they've definitely attacked the concept that whether you're biologically male or female, you have these forces and principles, the yin and yang, the duality principle within your psyche, right? The animus and the anima, or whatever you want to call it. And so what they've done is they've confused the archetypes through the culture, through the media, Hollywood, the pop culture, the music industry. Holy shit, we could talk forever. I'll have to have you back on my show to talk about your opinion on that sometime, Mark. But
we should do that.
Yeah. But the thing is that you're right. And when you're talking about these kind of like muscle bound tattoo guys, let's focus on men for a second. Talking about these kind of guys, these are posers, a lot of them. And clearly now Now we're being shown who the real men are, who the real warriors are, who the real women are, who are the real truth warriors in our society, who are there to be watchdogs against the government and now the media. I mean, the media was supposed to be the watchdog, but now they're a part of the whole thing. So there's been a systematic attack that's been going on for decades. You know, if you, as you said, if we went back, maybe 20, 30 years, I think we might have to push it back maybe 40 or 50. I mean, these were the men that went and stormed beaches and did all, and went to wars, even though, you know, we know the spurious reasons for these wars anyways. But just the bravery, the idea of a call to duty, the idea to call and serve your community, the masculine principle of taking action, of bringing logic and reason to the discussion, of analyzing in detail and being very finely detailed in your approach, of not being afraid of confrontation, of not being afraid of debates with people. And look at our scientific establishment right now. Why are they not hosting debates between people like, I don't know, Dr. Judy Mikovits and Anthony Fauci, or, you know, on and on? I have documented thousands of medical health experts at the top of the ladder who have come out against these lockdown measures and this World Health Organization guideline system that would completely refute, with evidence and scientific argument, all of the claims being made by the media. Why is there not an octagon of debate with a referee or whatever between these two groups within the scientific community, and then spread that out? So the culture has become highly, you could say it's feminized, in the sense that we're not talking about the positive feminine aspect, but feminized in the way of the softening, because the feminine, one of the parts of the feminine principle is the soft, nurturing approach. And what they did is I think they isolated that element that's in all of us, and they hyper exploded it so that people are thinking emotively only, which means they cut us off from another way of thinking, which is you want to balance those hemispheres within yourself, between thinking with your intuition, which is different than emotive thinking, and thinking also with your logic and reason. It should be a balanced approach to thought. But look what they've done in the schools. Are they teaching children to have a holistic thought process, a critical thinking apparatus in their mind, questioning theories? Like when they talk about human origins in school, why don't they go, hey, kids, there's like 6 different theories of how humans got here. Why don't you write some essays on what you think? And maybe there's further research that needs to be done. No, they tell them it's this way. If they go to this school, if they go to a religious oriented school, it's this way. And, you know, and so they've compartmentalized our thinking to the point where they've disconnected men from both their true masculinity and their femininity, and also women as well. And now that they've flipped the archetypes in our consciousness, they've now played us off against each other. And is it any coincidence to anybody that right before this lockdown, we were having 2 major debates? There were many debates in our society, but 2 major fights, really, which was the idea that we had the far left extreme feminism coming in, trying to, you know, smash all forms of masculinity in the culture. And then we also had the climate issue. And I did a whole bunch of shows covering the climate issue and the fact that, you know, they were trying to use that as the fear-mongering tool to get everybody into a centralized world government. And it's interesting that my colleague Michael brought up the idea. He said, when they talk, these propagandists, when they talk about climate, they're not talking about the actual physical weather of the planet. They're talking about the climate of consciousness, because there is climate change. So if you listen to all the climate change arguments from Al Gore and all these people and apply it as a metaphor for consciousness and thought, you'll understand what I mean by this idea that they have messed up they've completely messed up the archetypes of thought within our minds. And so now men are incapable of thinking as real men would, and women are incapable of moving out of that nurture principle only into the masculinized side of the mind, the solar principle of the feminine, and also being able to have the ability to activate their logic and reason, take action, inspire their men to get off their ass and do something. You know, that's been destroyed. Now they've pitted men and women against each other. They've divided up the homes and the family units. The children are raised by the state and the pop culture. And now, you know, they've destroyed our foundation. And then, is it any coincidence, after doing that for how many decades, they then unleashed this ninja virus that is the smartest virus ever invented in the world to divide humanity even further and finish this power grab. So for me, this is a war on consciousness first. It always has been. And all of the boogeymen and the external threats that they're trying to scare everybody with, flip it round and look at it from the perspective that this has nothing to do with any physical virus or any physical climate change worry. It's all about controlling human consciousness.
Yeah, I feel that the social engineering preparation that went on was done because this stunt that we've had pulled on us was known to be coming. So it's a long-term thing. There was a long preparatory period getting ready for what we faced in 2020. And the social engineers, the societal manipulators, must have been very sure of themselves to have had the audacity and the arrogance to have gone ahead with this scam. They must have been very secure in the knowledge that there wouldn't be armies of warriors dragging them out in the street and lynching them from the nearest tree. Because I do feel there would have been a point where that would have happened. Maybe it wouldn't have been 20 or 30 years ago, as you said. Maybe it would have been 50, 60 or 100 years back. But there would have been a point in history where that would have happened. And these people would have been facing baying angry mobs that would have dragged them out into the village square and executed them on the spot. So they must have been very satisfied with what they considered to be a job well done in terms of the preparatory period for all of this.
Yes, very well said. And I agree with you. Yeah, I posted a meme on my Instagram that got a lot of traction, and it was a picture of Mel Gibson from the movie The Patriot, and he's all bloodied up from battle or whatever, and it says, "Hey, so how committed are you to not taking the COVID vaccine?" And then the meme is me, and it's the picture of Mel Gibson coming out of this Revolutionary War. And I found it interesting that the meme got tons of attention and everybody loved it. And all the guys, yeah, man, woohoo, we're going to fight for our freedom. But then I'm like, yeah. And then what? You're back to binging on Netflix? Like, what's happening here? You know what I mean? So you're totally right on that. And it was a long-term thing. I believe this was planned. I interviewed Mickey Willis, who is the producer of the film Plandemic and Plandemic 2. I highly recommend people check out those films to get that detail and just, think about that concept that this is something that is not just suddenly happening as a random occurrence. There's so much evidence to show that this was thought out well before 2020. And that they've done dry runs on this. Think back to SARS, think back to H1N1, think back to the swine flu of 76. Mike Wallace going out, even there's good reports he did back then exposing the World Health Organization and the CDC back then. This is a game they keep playing. And I think they were testing the waters and they were seeing, massive resistance, because these guys have all the charts and graphs of where people are at, all the polls. And now they have the most sophisticated data collection technology in the world at their disposal with all the social media where we're providing our free labor as human beings to contribute to this massive database of information about what makes us push yes, what makes us push no, what pushes our buttons, what memes we like, what ones we don't, where we shop, where we drive, where we eat, what we do with our kids, etc. And now they have the ultimate collection tool of information, which is the dream of totalitarians and tyrants and psychopaths, to have an incredible, unprecedented advantage over the average person. And so the hardest thing for us right now is to communicate to people that are stuck in fear. They've been hypnotized. They're in a hypnotic trance at this point, and you try to communicate to those people, listen, I understand that it's very hard to know and come to terms with the fact that there is a multi-trillion-dollar, generationally driven, age-old level of knowledge amongst these elite classes about how your psychology works. And it's hard to come to terms with the fact that they would use that against you. But it's truth. There's nothing in history but precedence for this. So why would we suddenly go, oh, well, yeah, governments have been abusing human rights and humanity and all this for since their inception. And now that there's a virus, they suddenly are angels on our shoulder that just want what's best for us. It takes a lot for people to get to there, even though it's the most logical conclusion when you really look at the evidence. And so we have that job. We have that very important job of trying to deliver that information in a way that people can understand, that doesn't overwhelm them. But it's desperate at this point. We're at a point where we just in British Columbia, a bill was just passed, just with the provincial government, called Bill 19. I'm like, of course it's 19. Bill 19 that actually violates. I just spoke to constitutional lawyer Rocco Galati, who I'm going to be interviewing very soon, who's basically suing the federal government and the Crown, by the way. I was just talking to him, and he said this new bill violates 92% of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I'm sure if we talk to people from Australia and where you are, Mark, and everywhere else, we'd see governments doing the same thing. And so what people need to really realize is if that becomes the new normal, which is what they've already put into our subconscious months ago, the new normal for them is more imposition from government on their own people than ever before in history. And it's the biggest power grab in history. And if we aren't awake and aware and become strong within ourselves, strong enough to stand up, even if you're the only voice in the wilderness, even if you're the one person in your community, in your family, in your workplace, that is strong enough to stand up and say, you know what? I'm not wearing these masks. I'm not going along with these guidelines. I'm not going to be locked in my house. I'm not going to have my children taken from me on arbitrary rules. I'm not going to have my constitutional rights violated. I'm a human being, goddammit. My life has value. That's the kind of spirit you need. And I've been telling people, just keep speaking the truth, even when your voice shakes.
But isn't it just so exasperating and frustrating knowing that the vast, overwhelming majority of people are stuck in that mindset of still believing what the mainstream media and governments tell them? And yet people like us who know different, we think about nothing else night and day than the truth of the matter and putting to bed all this. It really is. And that becomes our daily battle. Again, going back to the warrior symbology, it is. But I mean,
has it ever really been? If I think about it, I take heart in this. Has it ever really been any different? I mean, all we got now, the difference now is that nobody can hide what they are anymore. Okay, so I can't hide the fact that I care more about life, liberty, and my pursuit of happiness and the security of my family than I do about some 99.9997% survivability rate virus. I can't hide the fact that I feel like I want to know the truth, and that I have some very serious and educated questions for public officials, medical health authorities, etc., Bill Gates or whoever else. I can't hide that. And people that are going along with this and complying and not questioning and just getting all their information from the vastly corrupt and downvoted media. They've been getting downvoted like 70 to 80%. It's amazing to watch. Why they're stuck there. Because they're stuck in fear. And that is the source of all of this, is that this is not hyperbole or anything, that this is literally trauma-based mind control, my friends. And it's a subject that I've studied a long time, Mark. I know you have as well. And there's so many good people out there that have been trying to educate humanity about this, that when they can traumatize the mind or even just speak to your trauma that was already there, right? They know how to speak like that worm tongue in your ear to activate past trauma that you didn't deal with. And now you are being converted into the hall monitors of the world, the new, what are they calling it? Civilian police or deputized civilians that are going to go out and help with contact tracing. They're the new Stasi reporters for the government, right? Who is signing up for these jobs to turn their friends, neighbors, and family members into the authorities? Who is doing this? Well, it's the people who didn't do their shadow work, who didn't grow a spine, who don't have any masculinity in them, whether they're male or female, who don't have any inner strength. They are crippled with fear, and they live in an illusion in the world and can believe illusions because they were already living in an illusion before this lockdown. So what's happened with this is it's really showed everybody, and it's kind of interesting that their mask symbol of submission and contrition is actually turning against them, because now it's easy for us to look around and say, okay, that elderly gentleman over there that's not wearing a mask must know what's happening to that level, that he has not gone to the point where he's so afraid he's got like 6 masks on, like that 27-year-old over there, right? And you can see who's who, and then look online. Which celebrities right now that everybody loved and followed, which, I mean, for me, I follow a lot of UFC fighters and jiu-jitsu champions and boxers and that kind of stuff. Which one of them is actively trying to put out the truth?
Right.
And which one of them is going along, taking the money, doing the ads on behalf of their managers that are telling them what to say, who are puppets, who are fake, who are, like you said, those beefed up tattoo guys. By the way, they tap first in jiu-jitsu, just so you know. Who's what, and who are the real warriors out there? Who are the real bastions of hope, liberty, virtue, goodness, courage in our society? Who embody virtue in our society, and who embodies fear and manipulation? And so for us, I believe there are more people that are on the fence right now and moving more to our side of the argument, which is just literally us. We're just questioning known liars and criminals. That's the side you're joining when you come to my side. It's just, I'm questioning known liars and criminals. If you got a problem with that, go somewhere else. But if there's more people coming there and listening to your show and listening to my show and so many others, then there are people. It's just that you got to remember something too, Mark, is that most people perform in public because we're so afraid of our reputations and looking bad and looking like this. And that's how these engineers designed this.
That's where the virtue signaling comes from.
Yes, exactly. They designed this perfectly so that the argument is, if you don't follow every single rule, you are going to cause people to die. Like what more of a tyrannical argument do you need than that to say, if you don't wear a mask, my mask doesn't work. If you don't take a vaccine, my vaccine doesn't work. If you don't socially distance, my social distancing doesn't work. And what that does is it brings back this old tribal hive mind, little reptilian brain ping in all of our brains, where we all go, oh, shame the ones who are standing outside of the box. Shame the ones because they're dangerous. Do you know that Mussolini, Hitler, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Pol Pot, Idi Amin, etc., all used similar arguments to get entire populations to actually cheer on the mass extermination of people? So it's gone to that level in the past. And make no mistake about it, they can get it there again. People are cheering when people are getting arrested out of restaurants and bars, whatever, because they're not obeying the rules or they're arguing with the waitress or whatever. What do you think they could do if they turned the volume up a little bit and really stoked the fear and said, oh, guess what? COVID has mutated and now it preys only on children. Children are dying all over the world from this. And they could start something like that. What do you think that would do? That would turn parents into schizophrenics, and they would cheer for every single person that didn't obey whatever the government makes up next, because otherwise all the children are going to die. You see how they can do it? So they're playing us against each other. And I'm really happy to see that places like Berlin, I know in the UK there's been some big protests. In Quebec there's been some big protests. All around the world, people are trying the best that they can to wake up their friends and family. And I think the more that this thing carries on, it's just going to get worse for these controllers, because the cat is out of the bag and it's not going back in. And people like you and I are never going to let that happen anyways.
That's right. And that's a phrase I've been using myself. The lid has been blown off the scamdemic and it's not going back on anytime soon. And you made a very good point about celebrities and famous people and the almost deafening silence that we've had from people in that world. So I keep a close eye on musicians and, famous music industry celebrities. And back in April, we had Lady Gaga curating this One World at Home concert, which was all United Nations Agenda 2030 reinforcing of, all that stuff. Yes. And you had the likes of Sir Mick Jagger and Sir Elton John and all these old rock dinosaurs performing from their living rooms and cooperating with the agenda. Not a word said out of place, not a word of criticism about how the scamdemic is being handled. And I noticed Bono's been a bit quiet, because Bono's always one for jumping on a political agenda and going out there and virtue signalling with his morals and all this. And Bob Geldof's been a bit quiet, and Sting, who are normally activists. Greta Thunberg's been a bit quiet on this one, for an activist as well, come to think of it. But there's been a few names from the music world who have stepped up and stuck their head above the parapet, and I've got nothing but respect for them, assuming their stance is sincere, and I've got no reason to assume it's not, to imagine it's not. So Van Morrison, who's also a sir. Got to give respect to that man. He came out a couple of weeks ago with 3 songs which are anti-lockdown measures, and he's been very critical of the government's stance and things that they're undertaking, so fair play.
Good man. Yeah.
Noel Gallagher of Oasis has come out criticising masks and saying he won't wear a mask in public and he won't be muzzled. So again, fair play to him. Ian Brown of the Stone Roses, I mean, he's been an awake and aware individual for years. He's been putting out truth songs for a couple of decades now. Respect to him. Right Said Fred. My God, the most unlikely names are coming forward. They were at the Trafalgar Square demo in London last weekend.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, Right Said Fred of I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt fame. So they're now speaking out against the government. So, okay, respect.
Maybe he could do a redo of the song of "I'm Too Sexy for My Mask."
Yeah, well, somebody has, yeah. And
really?
There's some great songs on YouTube by Media Bear. So they just put out these stinging satires of stuff that's going on. They did a version of "I Wear My Sunglasses at Night," and they called it "I Wear My Face Mask in the Car." And the lyric goes, good. "I wear my face mask in the car so I can virtue signal in the neighbourhood, and so I can placate all the Karens in the park." And they're doing great work, just lampooning the absolute madness of this whole thing. Just going back to what you were saying about the genders a while back there, I've actually been very impressed with how the females have been stepping up in this whole thing. So I've been getting a lot of women fans these past few months to my work. A lot of women have been emailing me. I spent about 2 decades as a DJ trying to get women fans, and it just didn't work. But now I'm doing this kind of work. Women seem to really dig what I'm doing, and they're reaching out to me and they're saying, thank you for your videos, thank you for expressing all this stuff. And I'm noticing this feminine principle, the sacred feminine principle of care, really seems to be coming into effect. So a lot of these women, you know, they are mothers, and that nurturing motherly instinct within them seems to be really coming to the fore. And at many of these protest events I've been attending, women have been taken to the stage and they've given some very impassioned speeches, you know, really putting their heart and soul into it. And I'm very impressed with how they've been responding to this. And by contrast, I'm very disappointed, generally speaking, with how the males have been responding to this. So it really seems to have been bringing out the best in the women in society, from my personal experience.
Yeah, there's so many. I've had the same thing. So many friends of mine, or people in my friend circle, even people I haven't talked to in years. I've had a lot of women, and especially mothers, reaching out to me. And so I've been actually targeting some of my content towards women and trying to inspire them. And I'm going to be doing some shows even with my wife just to get that going, because my wife and I have had these conversations sort of off screen for so long. I'm like, Monica, you got to get on with me one of these days. But think about the women out there that are leading the charge and showing as examples what real women are. Real women are balanced. They have the nurturing principle, but they also have that logic activated them in as well. Like people think like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Professor Dolores Cahill, Dr. Judy Mikovits. There's so many names of women that are speaking out with that flame that you would expect in male speakers. And yet also still maintaining that feminine nurture, take care of the children aspect. It's just wonderful to watch. It's something I've been praying for, because I knew that much of the agenda for that has been going on for, let's just say, the past 200 years, but let's say, it's ramped up, especially in the last 60 to 20 years, was to attack women specifically. Because if they knew, and this is part of this is like one of the strategies that is used in, when there's a communist takeover or a fascist takeover, is they attack women and especially mothers on the front of getting them to separate from the family unit, from that role in society, and actually try to encourage them to switch roles completely and take over the male role. And and then men are encouraged to just drink, be stupid, shut up, don't talk. You guys had your run. This whole thing that's come in. So there's been an attack on males, and there's also been a chemical and biological attack on males, especially in the West, and as of late, where look at the chemicals that are in everything. Look at the history of things like glyphosate and some of these other chemicals that are, you'd be amazed at where all this stuff is.
Yeah.
And, the sperm count is down. We're not even reproducing.
Chemical castration.
Yeah, that's the word. Chemical castration. And then also psychological castration. It's a multi-pronged attack. And does anybody think that's a coincidence that before these globalists moved in, and I'm just thinking in the Western context because that's where I live, they moved in because they knew that the ideology of freedom, independence, the very masculine identity that's at the root of Western civilization and these ideas of free societies, etc., they knew that wouldn't be something people would give up, men or women. And it's the envy of the world. I mean, people are coming from all over the world to share in that experience. So to get everybody out of that center in order to replace it with this one seasoned globalist world that they want, they had to destroy the pillars of freedom and independence. And so they had to do that first in the male. They had to do it in the female in the home, and then actually recruit the women through the ads, through the media, through the pop culture, the Oprah Winfrey's, the Ellen, all this stuff, and get women distracted easily into this one little area over here, while they got men completely demasculated and stuck in this little frequency over here. And then you can easily pit them against each other, and it's divide and conquer, right? And then now, like you said, there's no men rising up physically to stop this incursion. And the women were just sitting there like deer in the headlights for so long, right? So now that we saw this hit, I've seen the sea change, and I think it's because of the effects on children is what really started. When I talk to a lot of women, most of them have started to wake up to so much of this stuff because of the fact that they saw what the schools were making their kids go through. Yeah. They learned, they listened to a lot of these experts that have been saying for years about how children, we need facial recognition. They need to see facial features. That's how you get, your personality and everything. It's not words. Children learn by watching your movement, and your facial movement. So, the masking, the fear, and on and on. So that became a huge thing. Now, second to that, there's also been this big exposure happening at the same time as this lockdown and all that corruption with Hollywood, and specifically the human trafficking issue, the online pedophilia, the child sex trafficking. I've been covering this a lot on my show as well. And as much as I thought, man, this is so dark for people to come to terms with, let alone just an everyday mom that just wants to, live a normal life, I thought it might have the opposite effect of turning people away, but it hasn't, Mark. It has been one of the biggest reasons I think that it's pinged something in women where they're like, our children and our society are being attacked on all fronts. And many of the women I'm speaking to now are realizing that all the little petty arguments that the media was pushing, racism, genders, this stuff, that is secondary, because the number one world champion of victimhood, if you could give anybody that, is children. Children win the gold medal, sadly, in this world. And so that could be a unifying issue between all these extreme polarities in politics and society, is children. And so isn't it interesting that happened at the same time as all these egregious acts by government to destabilize the psychological development of children around the world by imposing these measures, that now we have all these mothers waking up. So I think it's having the opposite effect of what these planners had in mind. I think a lot of their moves, yes, it's motivated by their arrogance, but I think it was also motivated by fear, because they were starting to already lose that grip, I think, that they had in the polls and everything else. So they needed something massive to really shock everybody back into line, and it's backfiring on them. And it's backfiring because women are starting to rise up and lead the charge. And because of that, those sleeping giants in men are starting to awaken as well and go, hey, well, if she's doing it, I better do something. And they're connecting back to that inner John Wayne or Bruce Lee or whatever. And I'm seeing more men come to the game as well. So that's where I'm putting my hope. I'm putting my hope right now in women. They could be the doomsday weapon for civilization, or they could be the saviors of the human species. And I think we're seeing it go towards the latter. And I'm so grateful and I'm so happy to see it. And I think it's just going to continue.
That's right. That is the one subject that would do it. That is the game changer, the suffering of children. You know,
Yes.
I'm disappointed at how few people seem to be getting upset about the removal of their rights and freedoms, and they're just putting up with outrageous tyranny. And they don't seem to be getting all bent out of shape by that, as they should be. But if the truth of the staggering, mind-blowing scale of pedophilia and child sex trafficking and the general sexual abuse of children were ever to get out there and become public knowledge, that would be the one that would get everyone on the same page, because nobody with their humanity intact can abide to hear about the suffering of children and, you know, some of the unbelievably horrific stories that we get of what gets done to some of these kids. So if there was a way of that getting out there and becoming common knowledge, things would never be the same again.
They wouldn't, and they won't. And they're not going to be able to put this cat in the bag. And someone even made a really good argument to me where they said they believe, and I'm just putting this out there, they believe that a lot of the continuation of these lockdowns and everything else has to do with the fact that around the world, these trafficking networks are getting rounded up,
Yes.
that there's a lot of these exposures coming out of major celebrities. Yeah. And like, you know, think back to the Wayfair scandals, and it's just got people questioning. And, you know, some of these documentaries that have gone completely viral, historic levels of people tuning in, like in the billions to watch some of these documentaries. It means it's striking a chord with people. And now more and more people are having the courage to come out. Like even people like Rose McGowan is now coming out and sharing a lot of stuff that happened to her, and so many others. I've spoken on my show to 2 major Hollywood producers that have come on to share what they know about what's going on behind the scenes. I've talked to dozens more who don't want to go on the air, but that we know it's coming out. And so, you know, look, all you got to do to understand where they're at in the game is look at what the media is attacking the most. Where are they expending ammunition? Where are they shooting their arrows? Where are they? Think about it. The media has to spend money and pay people and put a whole propaganda string together to report on anything. So if they're attacking certain people, certain ideas, they're trying to make it look like anybody talking about child sex trafficking is just a conspiracy theorist. They're trying to downplay you know, some of the allegations that have been made against some very high profile celebrities and figures. They're trying to make it look like, you know, Epstein was just a one-off. He's just a corrupt little pedo, blah, blah, blah. When, you know, there's a million Epsteins out there that are the procurers of children on behalf of the real people that are involved at this and the real cult level that I've analyzed for over 18 years with this stuff, going back to people like Ted Gunderson and all that. Like, if you really open up this door, there's no going back to normal life anyways. So I said in one of my videos, and this was what I think really got one of my shows viral, was I said, you want to know what the new normal is? The new normal is the exposure of evil. That is the new normal, not government tyranny, not the wearing of masks and imposing Sharia law on the entire planet, exposing liars, criminals, and evil in our world. That is going to be the new normal. Right. And that resonated, Mark, with people. And I thought, whoa, I didn't expect that. I thought I might get a few hits on that one, but it got all over the place. And I was glad to see it because that is the warrior spirit. That's the mindset we need to have. We need to go into this with confidence. We need to have that knowledge in ourselves that victory of this situation is at hand and that we got to keep pushing this boulder up the hill. And the more we do it and lead by example, others will follow. And I think we're going to see more whistleblowers coming out than ever before. We've already had people coming from within Google, YouTube, Hollywood, politics, everywhere you can imagine on various issues. That temperature is going to keep rising. And is it any coincidence that as that is rising, so is the encroachment of government on our freedoms and the media campaign to say it's fact-checked. Snopes said it wasn't true. And it's all this, you know. When you see that, that's panic. That's pure panic.
That's right.
So make no mistake, we got him on the back foot. We got him in the corner. Let's start landing some uppercuts.
That's right. This will be the one that does it. And some good advice is always when the media is entraining you to look in a particular direction and they're trying to make you obsess about COVID this, COVID that, COVID the other, it's always a good thing to look in other directions to see what else is going on that, you know, this narrative is providing a smokescreen for. And there is lots of other stuff going on in the world, and this seems to be a good point to switch gears in the conversation, because I do want to get on to talking about the Q plan and what's going on in the United States with Donald Trump. And I may have just lost half of my audience at the very mention of those words, because there's no subject like Q and Trump to pit friend against friend, brother against brother. It really does divide opinion. But I've done some shows on the Q issue, and I know you have too, and it seems we've got quite a similar attitude to it, which is we are truth researchers, and as such we can't ignore the fact that this narrative is going on and it is generating a lot of discussion and, of course, discord. So we can't ignore it. We do have to address it if we want to be taken seriously in this field. A problem is that as researchers, we require evidence and proofs whenever any claims are made, and particularly wild claims. And the Q plan, by its very nature, has to be covert. It has to operate under the radar. It has to operate with stealth. And the communications have to be deeply coded and ambiguous for obvious reasons. So does that mean that we should dismiss it all simply as a bullshit psyop, which so many people have it down as? A lot of hardcore, real-world sort of 3D reality truthers just have this down as yet another psyop. Or has there been enough evidence presented to suggest that there could be validity to the Q plan? I think, at the very least, it deserves looking at, it deserves some scrutiny, and it deserves some consideration. So I wonder what your stance is on that.
Yes. Well, if anybody was leaving because they were worried about this, please come back and stick around. And, what I say, just like yourself, Mark, is you rolled that out really nicely, is we're here investigating this together. So I said, when I started doing interviews on Q, I said, I'm going to do my own op on Q, Trump. I've been covering Trump since day one. Just looking at this whole phenomena. And I said, we're here to find out what's what. And I'll even bring on a guest and give them a really fair interview. And then later go, maybe that wasn't the best guest to bring on or whatever. But this is investigative journalism. This is what you have to do. This is what the media is afraid to do. And guess what? The vast majority of people that I have talked to about this possibility of essentially a coup to take back America from the hands of what we used to call just the shadow government Illuminati, which is now called the Deep State, because I guess it sounds more academic. But whatever, the corrupt elements within the U.S. that have been there that everybody knows exists. Okay, and we've been speaking about this. There's been speakers and books written and presentations done and films done on it. We know it's there. Everybody's just wondering who's going to dismantle it, right? And I went into looking into Q and to Trump with skepticism, because I've been following politics long enough to know that the vast majority of politicians are some of the worst scum of humanity rising to the top, who just want power. But I guess that's what made me start looking differently at Trump, was in the beginning, to start with him, I had followed him from an entrepreneurial perspective. I'm an entrepreneur, I run a business. And so I always knew about Trump. And, when I would be going back and forth to the US, most people I spoke to that knew him personally, I knew people that were some of his personal bodyguards and things like that. They're like, the man is one of the most gracious stand-up men. He's a man of his word. He's squeaky clean. He is who he says he is. He puts out a veneer for the media because you're dealing with, the media. But the real man is true blue. And I was like, wow, interesting. And then when it was coming up to the election, and I saw 100% negative coverage on the man. 100%. I'm like, I've never seen this before. When Obama whispered he was running, he was suddenly Jesus Christ returned. And then when he got elected, man, Time magazine put the American seal around his head like a halo and made him out to be the savior of humanity. And what's interesting, how ironic it is that so many Obama voters voted Trump in. A lot of people don't know that. And so, you sit back and you realize, okay, I just went instinctively and went, okay, the media absolutely hates him. What are they so afraid of? He's a celebrity. He's a billionaire. He's got a supermodel wife from Slovenia. This guy is a marketing dream. Everything he touches turns to gold. Marketers love him. He was, you know what I mean? Why would don't these people want to make money? Why would they be working against their own best interests to defame the man for such petty nonsense that can easily be debunked if you really take them line by line? And that's another thing I started to do is I went, okay, they're saying he's a misogynist or racist and all this stuff, and he's a bumbling idiot and whatever the media tries to do. And when you actually analyze what they're saying and you go to the full statements and you watch the full press conferences and you see the real people that support him and you see the Bilderbergers hate him, the CFR hates him, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bushes, the Hollywood elite, the Rockefeller Institute, the world, everybody hates the man. And I'm like, well, all the most evil, corrupt people in the world are afraid of this guy. Why is that? And so the more you dug into Trump, the more you realize that most of what you hear about him is complete. It's not even just a misquote. It's complete bullshit. And that really pissed me off as I went, okay, I don't know yet if I support the man. I don't know if he's a real deal or if he's another Trojan horse. But it is rather interesting that all the people that do have this plan that I've looked at my whole life, they hate him and they're afraid of him and they're showing signs of that. And they did not expect him to get elected. Yeah. And he did. And so I went, okay, we started from there. And then, 2017, Q comes on live in these 8kun and 8chan, 4chan, all these little sort of black off the cuff internet forums where all the top autists and very intelligent people go to, argue. It's like Twitter for high IQ autists, right? And they went on there and started posting all this stuff, and it's taken storm. There's 300 million people around the world that support Q, probably more. And then you go, well, the average researcher that doesn't go in and try to actually debunk it. Okay, because to debunk it, you can't just read an article, go, oh, well, they're just saying trust the plan and trust them. And it's that you can't just have a feeling about it. You got to go fact by fact, line by line and try to debunk it. And that's what I tried to do. I went in, I'm going to try to debunk this thing. So I went in and I started researching it. And I came out completely unexpectedly realizing that there is something very real about the Q posts. And I'm not into all the q-anons and all the people that interpret it and make predictions that are all false and aren't actually what was said on the boards. That's a different story. And that's what the media focuses on when they try to debunk it. If you actually go to the posts from the beginning and you follow it and you realize we're watching a war happen, and there's a lot of people that haven't actually fought a day in their lives. So they don't understand how war works and how strategy works. So when they just come at it and go, oh, it looks like some kind of psyop. It's like, well, that's not good enough. How do you know about the art of war and strategy and all this stuff and how it really goes? And I'm thinking, as I'm researching all these posts, I'm like, well, if there was an operation to provide information to the public that was very needed, which shows that they knew the public, where the public was at was going to affect the outcome of this plan, right? They did it in a way that provided both a front channel through Trump on Twitter and by him smashing the media every single day in his press conferences, and then also through a back channel of providing classified, declassified, and just common knowledge research information that's with sources. And when you really look back at what Q is exposing, it's a lot of the same things I've been exposing for years on my own, independently, without any kind of intelligence operation going on. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then my feeling was, well, what if they're using all of those as bait to lure me in and try to convince me that, and I went, okay, I'll watch for that. I kept going. And all I've seen from the Q boards, okay, again, separate from QAnons, many of them are great, but there's many that I have lots of questions about. But the Q boards, and then comparing those to Trump's tweets, his statements, his actions, which a lot of people never talk about, what he actually signs into law, what he actually does. It was just, I got to a point where there were so many quote unquote coincidences that for me, I couldn't seriously sit there and say, oh, this is all bunk. It was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. And I could do a whole show just on that, taking people through it, nose by nose, line by line, on why that convinced me that there's something happening here. What it turns out to be in the end, whether it gets co-opted, I don't know. But I do know that they expose these groups. They expose the Clintons, the Obamas, the Vatican, the Rockefeller Rothschild family networks, many of the secret societies, the Freemasons, the intelligence, Five Eyes, the intelligence agencies of the world, the corruption that's gone within the FBI, the drug trafficking, the child trafficking, the human trafficking, the whole Hollywood pedophilia and corruption issue, the financial corruption, the deals with Saudi Arabia and Israel and so many other things. They even get into the UFO phenomenon. They get into so many other aspects. And when they talk about it on the boards, it's just lines of logic. They're teaching the Socratic method of thought. And then here's the actual here's the article, here's the tweet, here's the video, here's this. So that way, when information is presented, it's not somebody telling you some kind of mythology. It's based in fact. And that's what the media is. They're terrified to actually get into any of the actual posts. They will never report on specific posts. They'll only report on what they're putting out as the perception that people have of these groups of people that are saying Q, 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 Trump, Trump, Trump. Many of them who are ignorant. But the fact of the matter is there is a real layer of intelligence being dropped to the public around the world in a way that has never been done before. It has had the recognition of now, I think, 2 or 3 major generals in the United States. I'm trying to remember one of the names of the generals. I did a post on this, who actually came out and said he knew where it was. It's a little group. Q is basically a group out of Virginia. That's a collection of intelligence operatives that have left places like the CIA, the NSA, and the DIA, and that are they've been working behind the scenes to try to get someone into office that could win against Clinton, and then that could also work in tandem with the drops of this information to the public, because if the public could be made aware, then it wouldn't be such a big smash when all these indictments drop and the trials start and all these types of things. So, on and on we could go. And I know everybody listening probably has their counterpoints in their mind, and we have to address each one individually. But my general feeling is that what we're witnessing, whether Q or not, Trump or not, the people that are following these movements, when I speak to them, they believe in family values. They believe in individual freedom. They believe in prosperity. They're sick and tired of being taxed into oblivion. They're sick and tired of having their country sold out to China and places around the world. They're sick and tired of having gangs and drugs and crime and human trafficking rampant in the streets and actually encouraged based on the policies made by these governments. They're sick and tired of being told that they're all just a bunch of Nazis and conspiracy theorists, and that if they love their president and support what he's doing, that they're somehow evil and all of this. They're sick of the media corruption. They're sick of the COVID lies. That's another thing Q talks about regularly, is how this is all part of a bigger thing, which we all know. Sure. And so these are the people, the real people. And the media, when the media tries to paint a brush of, oh, they're just a bunch of dangerous right-wing conspiracy theorists, you go, well, what does that make you, media? You're of the left now. You're the talking points of the far left globalist elites that run the world. So that's where I look at it. And I just said this in the beginning. I said, Q or not, Trump or not, anybody firing black arrows into the heart of these evil organizations and individuals, I'll pull my battle horse up next beside them and cheer them on. And if they ever turn their arrows upon us, then they're going to invoke a fury that they've never seen before. And so I would say that what they've done, if you want to accuse Q of doing anything, they have woken up multi-millions of people to factual, documented corruption that has existed worldwide in their governments and in their banking institutions for decades. And so if anybody wants to slight them for that, that's up to them. But if this was some kind of cult or psyop, it's the first cult or psyop in the world that is encouraging people to think for themselves.
Right. And just the fact that the mainstream media feels the constant need to try and debunk QAnon. All you've got to do is make a post about it on social media or on YouTube, and up pops a box saying QAnon is a far-right conspiracy theory. You know, the fact-checking thing comes in, and they seem desperate to just discredit the whole thing. And also the constant savaging and demonizing that Trump gets from the world's mainstream press has to tell you something as well, as you mentioned, because previous presidents never got this. Obama was presented as the savior of the world when he first appeared, out of nowhere, incidentally. At least Trump's got a multi-decade history. Obama just appeared, and he's presented
George Bush Jr., Mark. George Bush Jr.
Yeah,
He's a real bumbling idiot, but how come the media didn't attack him?
Well, exactly. Exactly. He's a vicious little psychopath, as well as being, you know, mentally retarded, but he didn't get any stick from the press. He was just completely supported. And then Trump comes out and he's portrayed as the Antichrist. And it's a reminder that we have satanic inversion everywhere in society. Just look at the way people are being framed in this COVID narrative. So the people that follow government dictates and wear masks and socially distance and do everything the government asks of them and just sit back and let all their freedoms be taken away are portrayed as good citizens, good people, helping to stop the spread of the virus. Meanwhile, activists who go out there and try and defend the rights and freedoms of not only themselves, but everyone else, are portrayed as dangerous and rebels and, you know, people that just need to be put down. So that's the way everything's twisted in society. And another thought is so many truth researchers are so quick to dismiss Q as a bullshit psyop. And it seems to me that many of them are addicted to doom and gloom and dread. They've got everything invested in being the ones to tell you how fucked up everything is and how we don't have a future and how dreadful and terrible everything's going to get. They don't seem to want to entertain the idea that anything good could be happening. And, you know, it's like, wouldn't you like this to be really happening? You know, wouldn't it be great if this thing was real and valid? But so many truthers just don't want to look at anything vaguely positive. They just seem to have everything invested in the doom and the gloom. And I'm not like that.
No, and good for you, and good point. And I said this in one of my videos as well, where I was trying to bring the point that I think, if we really get honest here, I think a lot of, especially the old school truthers or whatever, who God love them, they have served humanity well, and we understand, but you get addicted to being in the limelight and being the voice of authority, and you don't want competition in that realm. It's human nature, and we have to watch that in ourselves, all of us.
You get
especially
addicted
the
to
more
doom.
notoriety that you get for your work, and that's something I've known for a long time. It's very similar to the lesson I learned, you know, when I received my black belt in jiu-jitsu. I realized this is a moment of humility. This is not a moment of, oh, I'm a black belt, I can kick everybody's ass now. I realized actually that's when the knowledge truly begins. You know, I just got off my training wheels, you know, and so that's how I see it. And there's a lot of people get envious and jealous of the fact that they've been, you know, and I feel for them because they've been crying the voice in the wilderness. They've been suppressed. They've been censored. They've had lots of battle scars and battle wounds doing this work. And then here comes this movement that is able to reach millions of people around the world and report information in a way that no one's ever done before, and synthesize information in a way no one's done before. And they look at it as, oh, man, they're taking my market share. They're taking my voice away. Everybody's going to follow them. They're not going to follow me. I got that feeling from so many people because what I would do, Mark, is I would say, okay, debunk it. Like, prove to me that there's not something real here. Here's some posts with links and facts. Are you saying that whole post is a lie? Are you saying that, you know, whatever they're talking about isn't happening? And the vast majority of people couldn't actually debunk the post. They just go back to this ranting and raving about how it's a psyop. And I'm like, well, one of us is right. One of us is wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to come on the air and eat crow. Okay. But so far.
Me too. I've said all along, I'm going to put my hands up and say I was wrong about this if it turns out to be the case.
100%. But let's think this. You and I support it for what reason? We support it for what they're saying, what they're exposing. I support it because QAnon, the Q movement, which now we should just be really calling the Patriot movement. Okay, and even Q did a post saying, stop calling yourself QAnon. The media is using that to attack you. You're a patriot. You're an individual. You think for yourself. You're not in a cult. We don't want it to be like that. when I see them making move after move to make sure it doesn't turn into that, I'm very impressed, because most of these movements in the past have just embraced being a cult. You know what I mean? So that was interesting to me. But basically, when we have a situation where I think the world is being put into I don't know if it has to do with the where the planetary alignments are, or where humans are at in their evolutionary consciousness or whatever, but something's happening worldwide. And a lot of people feel that it's only going to happen with the little people, the average people, the lower classes that are fighting against the elites, because we've all been raised in Marxist propaganda since day one, okay? But the reality is humanity. That means people in government, people in the military, people in the corporate world, people in Hollywood are also waking up, okay? There are good people in this world. I think the vast majority of people mean well. The only issue is meaning well isn't good enough to fight against evil, so we're always the victim, right? But the thing is that well-meaning, that good virtue that's in a lot of people, that motivated many of these military people to join the military, to fight for the freedom and the country they believe in, even if it was taken over from within by globalists and those wars were financed and that aside, that's also something Q gets into, by the way. That aside, the fact that people are waking up from within the system, we have more whistleblowers coming out now than any other time in human history, okay, sharing real data, not bullshit, real data. Why is it such a stretch that if America was literally on the cusp with if Clinton would have got in, we would literally be completely involved in the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, in the Paris Climate Accord. We would be embroiled in wars against China, or probably against Russia and other places. Financially, we would be completely decimated with this Green New Deal shit coming in. So the fact that we're even talking right now about this is only because that didn't happen. Something changed. It was a glitch in the matrix, and Trump got in. And from that day on, does anybody even know how many human trafficking networks and child trafficking networks and all that he has personally been in charge of arresting and rounding up and exposing? I mean, we didn't even talk about Epstein or any of this stuff until Trump got elected. It wouldn't have happened before. So I say to people, just look around it and realize that, of course, people within the intelligence communities aren't all evil Illuminati Satanists. Not every single one of them. Not every single banker. Not every single media journalist. Not every single military person or police officer or politician even. A lot of them, there are good people. The problem was that they were outnumbered within those organizations, okay? So now we saw it makes sense that if there was going to be something to turn it around, it would have to be done this way. This is the way you would have to do it, because people are brainwashed by the media. And something that Q has said time and time again is that people can't be told the truth. The programming is too deep. They must be shown the truth. Yes. So that's why we have to kind of go through this excruciating wait for these charges to be laid, which I think we're going to start to hit the fan here in October, and all this stuff to really come out. And notice that it actually has happened. People are looking into it and going, yes, there was all this corruption in the past. We were getting raked through the coals by the banks and the taxes and these criminal psychopaths. There is this problem of pedophilia in government. There are big acting agents that are involved in this. So the average person wouldn't be able to fight that. But if you had some very well-trained people that cared about their country within the government, in the military, and the military would be that place. Think about it. It would be. Those are the people that sign up to die for their country. Okay, the vast majority of people just go to Taco Bell. These guys are going to training camps to die for their country. So it would happen there. It would happen in the intelligence agencies, because these people would see all the machinations and the corruption going on for decades without being checked. And the good moral people would have to bite their lip for a while. But meanwhile, maybe they saved a few things on some hard drives. Maybe they sent some emails to some very important people. Maybe they helped organize some meetings and started scoping out what candidate they could get in so that they could save their country from what was coming next. And so that will then permeate around the globe if this happens, right? So that's why, to me, if there was a takeover and another American Revolution in the modern age with the internet and everything, this is how it would happen. And if you wanted to awaken humanity, you can't go around shaking people by the shoulders and acting like a Jehovah's Witness and knocking on people's doors and trying to recruit. People need to be shown the truth, and that takes time. So I feel like, to me, if there's something happening, this is how it would happen, you know?
Critics and opponents of Trump say, why is he pushing vaccines when he must know that they're damaging to human health? Why is he talking about deploying the military to defeat the virus? Why is he making out that the virus is real, even though he refers to it as the China virus and the Kung flu and all of this? But, people say, well, he's acknowledging that it's real. Why is he not blowing the whistle and telling everyone it's a scam? Well, the answer to that must be, like you said, the vast majority of the public are brainwashed, they're trauma-based mind controlled, and they're just not ready to have these truth bombs dropped on them right yet. So the media has been bombarding them with the idea that there's this killer virus that could strike them down any minute. He kind of has to play along with it for now and say to people the sort of things they would expect a responsible president to say. So many people do believe in vaccination, so they would expect to hear a responsible president saying that he's going to get vaccines out there.
To your point, Mark, so I don't, because this is important, okay? And I've had this discussion with so many people. Think about it. The caricature of Trump that the media has created for the minds of the public so that they don't actually hear what he's really saying. And obviously, maybe not everybody's into his personality or his style. Personally, he's just an alpha male who's been around the block with the media for decades. And I personally find him to be quite entertaining when you know who he's talking to. But in the end, you look at it and you go, how, if he's talking about vaccines, did anybody hear Dr. Judy Mikovits define vaccine in some of her interviews? Because a lot of people sent that to me about her. They said, oh, she's pro-vaccine. And I'm like, no. Did you hear what she said? She defined what a vaccine is. A vaccine is not what GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, that's not what they make. They make chemical cocktails with all kinds of particles and aborted fetal cell tissues and damaging ingredients that they then mass distribute to the public to keep them on the business model of the pharmaceutical industry. That is the most powerful lobby in Washington and in the world. If you're going to take them on, you can't just walk up and go, hey guys, all that shit is bad and blah, blah, blah. If Trump were to come out and say that, they would assassinate him yesterday and nobody would believe him, okay? But if you understand that when Mikovits and other people defined, and when you really are careful, you listen to what Trump has said and what he's done, what Mikovits defined a vaccine as is the way it should have been defined, which is immune system therapeutics, therapies to boost the immune system. So that category of vaccination, that was a word and a term that the pharmaceutical and medical industry that was set up by the Rockefellers and all their cronies back in the day and hijacked, they co-opted that term because it's what people associated with health. They're like, oh, there's a Spanish flu. Oh, there's measles. Oh, we need a solution. Oh, vaccine is the word. But the real definition of vaccine is something that is safe, is effective, supports the strengthening of your immune system, and introduces your immune system to a virus that you've never seen before. The idea of it is correct. The issue is what vaccines have become and what they've been created into. So when Trump says it, you're right. He has to say it because the media is going to be all over him. They'll try to discredit him. They've already tried to do it. And he did. If anybody goes back, I think somebody collected 27 tweets of Donald Trump from before he was president, even leading up to the election, and even some during his election, where he was calling out the autism in children, the damages done by vaccines. We need to investigate these products. We need to investigate these pharmaceutical companies. He's gone to war with pharma like nobody else has. And notice he's starting the fight with reducing their drug prices and reducing their connection to the government and government funding. He's starving them. Then it's the exposure. And remember, from day one, he was talking about HCQ. He was talking about the Droxy. He even admitted he was taking it. And every single time he brings up vaccine, he talks about it in tandem with, we've got vaccines coming, and we also have breakthroughs in therapeutics. And he said, there was a statement that he made in the past too. He said, no, the vaccine's not going to be mandatory. People are going to be able to choose what route they want to go. Some people want to go the vaccine route. Some people want to go the therapeutics route. I'm going to leave it up to the states. I'm going to leave it up to the people. Because he also doesn't want to be characterized as a dictator, because that's not what he wants to do. He could have just come in and been a dictator, and people might have gone, oh, look, he's taking action. But then he wouldn't be practicing what he preaches anyways, right? So there's a lot of things to roll into this. And then just look at what the media did, which was a complete lie about what he said about injecting detergent into your body, right? That was the farce of the age that exposed it all to me, when they tried to make it seem like he actually went and told people to go inject some Clorox into their body. And there were jokes about it and memes about it and Stephen Colbert bits about it.
Right.
And then when you watch the whole press conference and you see the context and the fact that he was kind of tongue in cheek, he was trying to understand it. He's trying to speak through the layman's terms so people can understand it. And he looks over at the scientific aide that was talking about it. He's like, yeah, isn't it like you inject some kind of, it's a detergent or something? It's not bleach, you idiots. It's a particular kind of light therapy with an actual, it's called a detergent. Go look up what that word means. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean Mr. Clean. It means it's something that it kills those toxins in the blood. And it's connected to even some of the research that people like Nikola Tesla and Wilhelm Reich and others were doing a long time ago about different ways of supporting the immune system. And my question is this what Trump, the real Trump, actually really means when he's saying vaccine? Or is he going to provide what he feels is a safe and effective vaccine for those that are on that program, and then also say, hey, look at all the studies with HCQ, look at all the studies with vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, look at all these other alternative therapies. You get to choose how you deal with this virus, right? And then the next stage could be, oh, it turns out that more evidence has come in, folks, as we see the CDC doing right now, by the way, that a lot of the numbers we were told were wrong, that it was only 6% of the death rate were actually dying only from the virus, and all these other little admissions that we're seeing. And then he's kind of been sidestepping Fauci and bringing this other guy in, I'm trying to remember his name, who's also in the past spoken about some of the issues with pharmaceutical companies and vaccines. And the media is hitting him up on that. So, and then with the whole thing about the military coming in, could it be that Trump only trusts the military because it was the military and he has reformed it and routed out a lot of the corrupt guys in there, was the one that got him elected and brought him into this whole project to save America? And could it be that those are the only people he can trust, because he can't trust the white coats, he can't trust the Democrats, he can't trust a lot of the other routes of bringing out whatever the therapies are going to be. And so he's got this in the backup. And I just say that as, hey, I don't know for sure. We're going to find out. But when somebody says something and then everybody makes an opinion about it, we have to be careful with that, including me, right? But I think there's something more here because of Trump's track record in questioning vaccines and this industry in the past, the conversations that he's had with Robert Kennedy and also, he's slipping my mind right now. There's some of the other doctors that have been speaking about it, and what he's also just said publicly to people. And then I'll finish with this on this point. One of the White House staffers was interviewed. I'm trying to remember the name. Oh, I think it was Chef Pete Stevens from Australia. He interviewed one of the staffers in the press that's within the White House group and asked all these questions to her. And she's like, no. The Trump administration is not going to mandate vaccines. He does not believe in that. He doesn't even really believe in vaccines, but he knows people want it. Like, she answered it openly, and many other things have come out about it as well. So the media is trying to freak everybody out, and it's kind of backfiring because think about it. They now are forced to report that Trump is pro-vaccine when they are pro-vaccine. And if they try to make it look like, oh, look, he's trying to con you, but that actually contradicts all the arguments they've been making for decades about how everybody should be getting a vaccine. Right. So there's also the strategy of how he's allowing these people to fall on their own sword and let the public watch it.
Right. Another thing I often get whenever I mention Trump from critics of him is they will say that he's got very close ties to the Zionist state of Israel and he's hobnobbing with Netanyahu and all this. And there's a story that often comes up that apparently he went personally bankrupt or was on the verge of it back in the 90s, and he was bankrolled by the Rothschilds. And people say, isn't that a red flag, and doesn't that suggest that he is, after all, in the pocket of the cabal and not the maverick free spirit that you think he is? Do you know much about those claims?
Well, first of all, they're complete bullshit, in my opinion. There's no evidence of that. That was actually leaked out, I think, by Anonymous, which was, if you remember Anonymous with the Guy Fawkes mask, started out with good intentions and then was very quickly overthrown and infested with left-wing extremists. And you'll see that now a lot of the anonymous groups are out there attacking Trump and trying to smear him and show pictures. Look, they were the ones out there going, look, here's a picture of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein at a party, and then here's him with Ghislaine Maxwell, and here's all this stuff. And you go, yeah, he's a multi-billionaire. He went to all the parties. They went to all the parties. Nobody knew about it back then, but Trump may have known about it. And there's this old thing in The Art of War where you learn how to keep your enemies very close to you so that you can learn about them, study them, and get as much information from them as possible. So because nobody reported it through that lens, they only reported it as, look, this means Trump is a pedophile and he's part of the satanic cult. It was all torn to shreds because, of course, both Epstein and Ghislaine were arrested. And they were known about under the Obama administrations, the Clinton administrations, the Bush administrations, but they weren't arrested then. So to me, there's been zero evidence. He's the most investigated man in the history of this planet. And he keeps coming out squeaky clean. Like your grandmother has probably done more shit than him when you really look at the criminal element of it or the legal element of it. And so there's no ground for it. It's just accusations. We also know that there are other interested parties, i.e. China and Russia, who would love to, take the reins of power and be the dominant currency in the world and all of that. So they have some of the most sophisticated forms of technology. The technology is actually called captology, C-A-P-T-ology, captology. And if you look up captology, it exists in the U.S. as well. It's a new technology where it's basically using computers as persuasive technology to persuade people's opinions. This is all the meme creations, the online stuff, directing your channel to certain videos and posts because you like certain content. They're like, oh, you like conspiracies? Check this conspiracy out. And they can literally guide you down rabbit holes. And you think you're working autonomously researching, but really your brain is being guided. And it's being guided by your own inner biases, by the way. And it's amazing how this technology works. So people could apply that to me as well. I'll take that. Fine. Maybe we'll see how it all lays out. But look at it like this. When it comes to Israel, there's something that Q said early on, and they said saving Israel for last. And there's a reason why. Because one of the biggest critiques that came from the alternative movement was like, well, Q never posts about Israel and the Zionists. You got to remember, the whole thing about Israel and the Zionists, my colleague and I, Michael, have done numerous shows with Chuck Morse, who now he goes by the pseudonym Charles Moskowitz. And he's a radio show host in the States. He's a Jewish man. And he's written about both the negative history of a lot of the Jewish Zionist movements and also the positive side of Jews that have fought within their own religious orders and family units to expose the negative side, and then also, have contributed to the West in so many ways that nobody ever wants to say. And there's stuff that goes back with Israel that, you can definitely say that a lot of the Jewish influence leading up to the foundation of Israel was conspiratorial because, of course, they were outnumbered in every country they ever were housed. There was, all kinds of reasons. And yes, there were corrupt individuals. Make no mistake about it, as there are in all groups. I mean, you haven't seen this level of hatred geared towards Italians for Mussolini or Germans for Nazi Germany, although it is to some extent. But you get it applied only to Jewish people, as if all Jews, religious Jews, are involved in some conspiracy to destroy the West. There may be Jewish actors within that conspiracy. There might be people within the state of Israel and in their Mossad, which is incredibly corrupt and is rampant with corruption, just like the CIA and everything else. And, Netanyahu, 100%. I mean, there's so many things we could get into about him. However, when it comes to Trump working with Israel is not about him being paid or propped up by Israel. It's about him keeping Israel under control, in my opinion, and keeping them on a leash. and trying to get to this point where we are right now, where he has brokered the first peace deal in I don't know how long between the Emirate States and the State of Israel, and it took forever for them to get him on the voting list for the Nobel Peace Prize, for crying out loud. Even though Obama won it for drone striking the fuck out of everybody in Pakistan for many years, but you just put it all together and you realize when you look at the actual evidence, not this very amateur one season view of how this whole conspiratorial networks operates, you realize it's not some Jewish bankers that run this conspiracy for the world. Those individual people who were Jewish, who aren't even Jewish in terms of religious ideology, they come from what you could call the Sabbatean, Setian lines of belief. They're not Jewish at all. And you can go into the history of the Jewish race and realize that all comes out of Egypt, etc., get into Ralph Ellis's work. So the whole thing is full of holes when you come up to the idea that, well, the real peak of the whole conspiracy is some Jewish bankers. It's like, no, these guys were banking on behalf of the royals, the top families, the 13 bloodlines who come from multiple different religions, who created religions, and who are secretly shaking hands behind the scenes with different parties, right, and different religious orders. So this is human beings, okay, that have come from within the Islamic world, the Christian world, the Jewish world, and yet don't leave Tibet and the Dalai Lama and all those guys out of it, because there's a whole thing going on over there as well of corruption and child pedophilia and all that stuff. And that these religions and these groups were created as a veneer for the public so that the public thinks, oh, look, it's the Protestants versus the Catholics. It's the Jews versus the Muslims. It's this, it's that. It's Israel versus, the United Arab Emirates. It's Trump. It's all a smokescreen. And the thing is if it's as sophisticated as I know it is, and I'm sure you do too, for Trump to just walk in there and go, all right, screw you, Israel. We're going to expose you day one. Screw you, Iran, China, everyone. It would be World War III overnight. So you have to do it in a diplomatic way, in a strategic way. It takes time. And Trump has done this thing throughout his entire presidency. And he used to do this when he was, doing real estate as well, where he knew there was a swamp. He knew the vast majority of people on both the Democrats and the Republicans were all swamp creatures, deep state, right? So he kept them close and let them do what they do. And he featured it and supported it and would be like, oh, yes, even with Clinton, remember, he was like, oh, she's such a gracious person and all this stuff. But then later he'd be like, yeah, you're going to be in jail. And what he's doing is he's allowing the Anthony Fauci's to show their true colors to the public. He's allowing a lot of these corrupt agents to show who they really are. He's featuring them and showing people instead of telling people, because people wouldn't believe him if he told you how bad it was. They would only believe it if he showed it. And so in that way, he's not trying to violate anyone's sovereignty. He's just showing people the cards that these people are dealt and how they're handed. And isn't it interesting that it was Trump that brokered these peace deals and not Obama and not Clinton and not Bush? In fact, they started how many wars and lost all this money and all the lives of people that fought in those wars. So there's more specifics to it that we can dive into where it really starts to fall apart. This whole argument that Trump is some shill for Israel. Israel is a shill for Trump. And that's how I see it at this point.
Right. It really does seem to me as if Trump was not meant to get elected in 2016. The control system thought that Hillary was going to get that one, and it came as a real shock to them, and it prompted some enemy action on their part. And it really feels to me now, at this stage in the game, as if the whole COVID psyop was cooked up to try and derail Trump's fortunes in the 2020 election, to keep him out of his second term. And it's all about what's happening in the US. The longer this thing gets dragged out and the more I analyse it, the more I feel instinctively that it's all to do with Trump and the US. It's just that the evildoers have taken the opportunity to plunge the rest of the world into the shit as well and make us all suffer along with America. So if my hunch on this is correct, and if Trump does get voted back in, and I think he probably will, because what kind of competition is Joe Biden really, unless they're going to wheel somebody else out at the last minute as an October surprise. But assuming he gets voted back in for his second term, I think we could see the narrative begin to shift very quickly from November the 4th onwards on this whole COVID thing, and the virus could be seen to wane very quickly. And if it's seen by the American public to be on the wane, then it's going to have to disappear in the rest of the world as well. Otherwise, people are going to be saying, well, how come the virus has gone away in America, but we're still being told that it's decimating Europe? So it's my instinct and it's my hope that in a little over a month, we could see things start to shift very dramatically with this whole virus narrative.
You're 100%, and I agree with you, and I feel very confident about that. It may take a little bit more time because we're dealing with a caged, cornered tiger, that is going to swing wildly, and this is when they're the most dangerous, is when they're really, really on the back foot, and you've injured and wounded your opponent, you've exposed them. Now they're going to come at you with big haymakers, and that's what we're seeing. That's what Antifa is. That's what all the looting and rioting is. That's what the violence in the street is all about. There's all kinds of things happening behind the scenes. They are desperate to keep this narrative going, even though it is shot full of so many holes. It's like a World War II submarine at this point. And it's just that the public at large is not yet fully aware, but vast majority of people are waking up. There is actual movements in the Black community in America, in the Hispanic community in America, in the LGBT community in America, there's people coming from all sides that are exiting the Democratic Party and moving over to vote for Trump. People that didn't vote for him in 2016 are now voting for him, plus the people that voted for him. I think if they do a fair election, it's a landslide victory. If they try to rig it with the mail-in voting, which is what they're trying to do, and that's what people need to see. The actions being taken that are now being justified by all the media pundits are completely unconstitutional, obviously a setup to try to make sure that Trump doesn't win. Michael Moore and Madonna and all these celebrities are coming out foaming at the mouth saying how they're ready to do anything, including burning down the White House to stop this from happening.
I was disappointed, just to jump in there, I was disappointed to hear the new album from Public Enemy. Being a hip-hop fan, they're a group I've always liked and respected, but they got a track on their new album where they're just laying into Trump and just savaging him, and I was very disappointed to hear them take that stance, as so many famous people are at this last minute.
Yeah, and it's a war too. In Hollywood, there's people, it's going the other way also, like you got people like James Woods, you got so many actors, directors, music artists that are coming out. They're more bold to speak about it. Athletes are coming out. Look at what's going on in the UFC. Dana White was speaking at the Republican National Convention. There's a lot of martial artists that are supportive of him. And so it's a war. It's definitely a war.
Kanye West is a fan.
Yeah, Kanye West, right? Yeah, exactly. He even kind of played a little stunt and said he was running for president just to why he did that? He did that not because he wants to be the president. He did that to show the hypocrisy within the Black community leaders, and to show that even if he ran under the same principles as Trump, they would hate him for every reason, because it's all about mind control. So that was a brilliant play on his part.
Right.
But yeah, they're going to try everything they can. And the reason is they know that Donald Trump is the only man alive that will take them to court and to prison for crimes against humanity. He will do it. That's why they were afraid of him. That's why they are still afraid of him. I think the Obama thing is about to break. And what people are going to find out about that man and what really went on, I think, is literally going to blow their head off at this point, because it's so incredible. And that's not me getting just information from q-anon. That's research. That's just knowing it and following it from day one, like yourself, Mark. But the thing is in the end, the truth prevails. And the vast majority of people, historically and presently, don't follow the truth frequency. The vast majority of people, the collective of humanity, what we call the crowd or the masses or the hive mind, they're always wrong in history. And we're starting to see people snap out of that groupthink and think on their own from within these communities that have a lot of pressure against them to hate Trump, right? Like, think about being a Black American today, that you suddenly say, you know what? Trump really has done more for me and my community and than any of these other presidents. There's so much lies about it. And you start coming out as a Black person talking about that, you're going to get destroyed by your community.
Right.
But even that is changing. We've got people like Candace Owens and Thomas Sowell and so many others that are helping to educate their community. And on we could go. And so the veneer is slipping. The illusion is dropping. The media is being exposed for what it is. The thumbs are down. I've been doing this new section on my Instagram stories where just in Canada, I've been posting YouTube links from the mainstream media and showing the vote of the public, where it's like 70 to 90% thumbs down of all the news articles coming out and videos coming out. And it's around the world as well. So that's a sign that people are pissed. People know something's wrong. And they are looking at Trump now in a different light than they did back in 2016, because they're saying, you know what? The guy didn't. Like, think about it. If he was literally Hitler, like they were saying in 2016, why hasn't he rounded up and shot all the top media organization heads and journalists? Why is he allowing CNN to keep smearing him 24/7? The worst he does is go out and start calling them names and getting in their face. He doesn't act like a Hitler would have. He doesn't have brown shirts arresting or rounding up people. That's Antifa. All right. And when Trump is putting the National Guard on the streets to round up Antifa leaders, which has now been designated as a terrorist organization because they are, and they're funded by offshore banks and white people, which is really interesting, that he is actually just taking action against violence in the streets and encouraging these other Democratic governors and mayors to do the same. Yet they're still ignoring him. That's showing the hand to the public. And the public is going, you know what? That is weird. Why would they allow these people to be burning and looting and screaming in the streets during a lockdown and a pandemic? Yet I can't even go to a barbecue with my friends without getting hauled out of my backyard and thrown into jail for not socially distancing. So they're seeing the contradictions. And it's just going to get worse for them. And I think you're right. They've been trying to push this up to the election because it's not just this is not America at stake. This is the entire Western world at stake. And everybody knows it, and they need to keep this going so that they can try to keep Trump out of office, because if he gets a second term, it's no more kid gloves. He's going to start coming right out and saying stuff.
Right. He's
going to start doing stuff. He just did a rally, I think it was in Pennsylvania, where he was talking about how enough of just allowing these criminals to sit there and do nothing. We need to start taking action. And I think we are going to see that action. The deep state players know it, and so they're going to throw everything they can. And as the narrative is collapsing in the public mind, when the election is finished, they're going to really see what's been happening. Because if the stuff comes out about the Epstein scandals, the Obama-Clinton scandals, the Clinton Foundation, what they've been a part of, the Bill Gates of the world, when that starts rolling out, people are going to see not just that the COVID pandemic was a lie and was orchestrated by top-level globalists and the CCP party of China. They're going to see all the other dominoes fall and go, oh, my God, this goes back to 9/11. This goes back to the invasion of Iraq. This goes back to JFK. This goes back to, Roswell or whatever. There's stuff we've been lied to about for so long. It's going to open up people's minds. A lot of people, I think, are going to lose their minds because their entire anchor points of reality are going to get kicked out from under them.
Right.
But those of us who've been preparing and have been looking at this and have been really curious about it, we are going to be the new media. So congratulations. We are going to be the people that are going to be out there helping to educate people about what's been happening. And together, what is the goal? Whether people agree with you and I about Trump or Q or not, what is the goal, my friends? The goal is we want a free society. You have a right to your own mind, to your speech, to defend yourself, to own the fruits of your labor, to reap what you sow, to not be harassed by government. And we could have some good governance happening, but it's not going to be just one man that does it. It's up to this society and every single individual in it to activate themselves so that we can stop this level of corruption from happening again. And if we think like that, then even if Trump turns on us and Q turns out to be the biggest lie psyop in human history, because it would have to be, then we would be empowered enough to deal with that if that ever happens. But so far, the signs are in the other direction, and I actually feel very positive about what's to come.
And meanwhile, in the UK, we've got the bumbling oaf Boris Johnson. Yeah, great.
Well, hey, I got Justin Trudeau, so I'll trade you.
Really good deal there. Yeah, thanks. And back in 2017, Anthony Fauci said up there on a public stage, this administration will have to deal with a major pandemic. And of course, he was in a position to know what was coming. And it seems they sat on it until the last year of Trump's first term to deliberately try and derail things. So it was known to be coming in 2020. I've given examples of predictive programming in movies and music videos and stuff, showing that this was long planned, and it was planned specifically for the year 2020. And so we've got it playing out now. But ultimately, the way it feels to me is we live in a world of duality, of opposing forces. And for evil to exist, there has to be a force of good to balance it out. And that can be tapped into at will any time enough of us want it. And evil has demonstrably had its way for a very long time. So it stands to reason that there has to come a point where good takes things back for itself. And as events unfold, it really feels that we're at that momentous point in history right now. I mean, if not now, then when?
Right. Yeah, it's so true. And there's been something that's really stuck out in my mind. It was something that Michael said. And for those who don't know, Michael Tessarian, he and I have been producing work for a long time. And he's one of those researchers that also, he comes out strong with his opinions on things, but he's always, every single show's been about think for yourself, don't get in groupthink. He does things on purpose to get people away from him because he doesn't want to be a cult leader. And so, there's Q and then there's M. I've been telling people that. So I've been talking to M, I've been talking to Michael, and one thing he said that really...
And they're both from James Bond.
Struck me. Yeah, they're both from... Yeah, that's true. Interesting. One thing that he said before the lockdown, and I even made a meme out of it, I loved it so much, was he said, evil has within it, or evil contains within it, the seeds of its own destruction. Meaning that because it's built on the foundation of illusion and lies and deception, it can go as long as people are swindled by it, but it starts to run out of steam because the truth cannot be hidden forever. It can't be. It's a force. It's embedded in our reality, this concept of truth. Right. And so evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction. And we are watching that happen in real time in 4K definition around, And the other thing that he said that I loved as well, which is that only the powerful have powerful enemies. So if you have a powerful enemy in front of you, that's because you yourself are powerful. And if you think about those two statements, let that be some wind in your sails to know that no matter how dark things get, wherever we all stand on our opinions about everything, we know we're fighting good versus evil, truth versus lies, freedom versus slavery, okay? Ignorance versus knowledge. We know that's what's happening. And if we realize that the other side, whatever side is lying and is manipulating you, they will run out of steam by the nature of the principle upon which they're founding their entire campaign. Whereas our side, the side of freedom, truth, justice, virtue, transparency, that force is the ground of humanity. That's the ground of being. Freedom as a concept is the ground of being, of who you are. And so freedom and truth, actually I've been saying this lately, truth and courage, they work together. Lies and fear work together. They're on two ends of the spectrum. The lies and the fear can only last so long. That's why these propagandists and these social engineers have to stay up day and night, controlling your mind, because that's how much it takes to keep the lie. I mean, just think of a lie you've told in your life, from taking cookies to the cookie jar or even bigger. It takes a long time it's very hard to actually maintain it because you can start to forget your own arguments in the story and you can't get it straight. Humans have trouble maintaining a lie. There's whole fields of study in detective work and in sociology and psychology about how, even the best liars in the world eventually make mistakes. So we actually default towards the truth. We have to work hard to lie. We don't necessarily default towards courage now, but humanity as a being on this planet, think about surviving without civilization. Courage was a daily experience. It was courage or death, right? Courage was what brought you food and shelter and whatever you needed for survival, whereas fear would have killed you. You'd be dead. You wouldn't have survived. So courage is in our genetics. It's in our DNA. It's in our consciousness. So truth and courage work together. Lie and fears work together. Which side are you on? Which way do you want to go? And what kind of a world do you want to see? What kind of leaders and heroes do you want to see rise up in your society? Those that come from truth and courage, or those that promote fear and lies? And the world is now being confronted with this because we've been living fear and lies for so long, and we're sick of it because it's already losing steam. And then when we feel afraid of what's happening, we go, oh, it's so big, Dave. There's nothing we can do. What could little me do? You sit back and realize that quote I just said to you about how only the powerful have powerful enemies. If these people have gained so much power and influence and work 24/7 to control your mind, the reason they have to do it is because of what you are. They're doing it because they know the game is over the moment you wake up and start inspiring other people to wake up and you embrace your humanity. They're afraid of that. That's why they want a cyborg transhumanist world. That's why they want to inject nanoparticles and quantum dots into you. That's why they want you standing where you're told to stand, wearing what you're told to wear, doing what you're told to do and nothing else, because that's what it takes to chain humanity to the ground and control them. And so the opposite of that can happen the moment we, or let's put it in an individual sense, you embrace truth and courage. And we might not always feel courageous, and we might not always know if what we're doing is the truth. But if we pursue that honestly, and we clear all the debris within ourselves and do that shadow work so that we can see more clearly, it's the old Kung Fu saying, look beyond the surface, see what is real in yourself and in others. And when you do that and you put all that together, that is the magical potion that's going to be rid of this once and for all. And if we can't get the rest of humanity to wake up, let them be what they want to be. Start in your own life, and freedom starts inside of you. It's not something the world is ever going to give you externally.
Well said. Inspiring words. And liars do always get tripped up by their own lies, and truth always rises to the surface in the end. And previously it's taken decades and centuries for this to happen. You know, there's people now poring over, there's the Tartarian mud flood subject that people are looking at.
Right.
They're looking at World War II history and what could have been misinformation there. People are poring over Jack the Ripper and the Titanic and the Great Fire of London. And, you know, some of these things that took place a very long time ago. But we now have this wonderful thing called the internet. We have the instantaneous exchange of information, and truth now is getting exposed much quicker than it ever used to, and lies are getting exposed for what they are much quicker than they ever used to. So it's incredible times. If we get to spring 2021 and the coronavirus narrative is still with us and things are still as bad or worse and the Q drops have disappeared, we may be able to safely conclude that Q was a bullshit psyop and Trump is indeed just another deep state asset playing a role. But somehow I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to find ourselves in that situation.
Or we could conclude that maybe they got rounded up and that they lost, you know, but I don't like to think like that either. We have to have, there's one thing that I always had to do whenever I would do competition in martial arts or some of the hard exams or even just some sparring matches I would do, is you have to get your framework of thinking into a positive state. Now that is not an ignorant state because, as I said, in the martial art field, in the warrior field, you can't lie to yourself. You can't. If you lie to yourself, you're dead. So, but the thing is you do have the ability to switch to an optimistic point of view, and that will allow you to be your best. If you're negative on yourself and you overestimate your opponent's abilities, you'll lose easily, right? A good example I use in the martial art world for those that follow it is one of the Canadian champions, George St. Pierre. I had the opportunity to train with him years ago. He's one of my favorite champions because he embodied that real martial artist spirit. And there was that fight, the historic fight he did against Matt Hughes, who was just, you know, he was unbeatable back in the day and just ragdolling opponents. And George St. Pierre used to tell stories of him kind of growing up watching Matt Hughes and idolizing him. And then when it came to the point where he met him in the octagon, you could see the difference. You could see him not looking at Matt Hughes in the face. He was shifty. He wasn't there. He was kind of overestimating him. And then he ended up losing that fight fairly easily towards Matt Hughes. And then when he really thought about it and went back to the drawing board and started training harder, and he had to fight a few more fights to get back to that spot, When you see the second fight against him and Matt Hughes, you see a totally different GSP. You see him eye contact, confident, not arrogant, but confident, face-to-face, calm, cool, collected. And he beat Matt Hughes easily in that second fight to win the championship, and the history was made. And what I'm bringing that example up for is to illustrate the mindset difference. It was the same two human beings in the same circumstances, roughly, and yet there were two different outcomes. And the outcome for George was the shift in his mentality, that he went in there with, I'm going to win or die. And what that does is it's not a suicide wish. It's a declaration to the universe or to God that you're so committed to bringing forward your best self in this moment that you're willing to come home on your shield in order to have that experience. Even if your opponent bests you, you never lost. Because if you lose in your mind, you will lose even if the opponent isn't as skilled as you are, right? Because it's a mental thing. So it's about having that positive mindset. And that is the mindset we need right now more than ever. It's not an unrealistic, airy-fairy, if we just sit in the lotus position, that Andromedans are going to save us. Not that. Or Jesus is going to come back and save us. Not that. What did the Christ tell you anyways? Speaking of that, he said, everything I can do, you can do, and greater. The kingdom of heaven is neither here nor there. It's within you. Go forth and do as I did. So what that message is you are about to embark on the hero's journey. And living a heroic life and living in the true masculine principle is embracing the fact that if you go into battle knowing that you're going to be victorious, knowing it to such a deep level that nothing can shake you, you will come home unscathed. This was an old adage with the Spartans, with the samurai. The guys who were pissing in their drawers before the fight started died first. The guys who went in going, today's a good day to die. I'm going to be victorious. They came home unscathed. So we have to have that mentality. And I think, whether Trump or Q, whatever happens with that, we don't need them anyways. They're just leaders to help wake humanity up, or they're false prophets. Either way, but it doesn't matter. They'll still end up doing you a service in the end and activate what the power is within you. And the more people that can do that, the tougher time these sorcerers are going to have in taking over the planet. And we just need to have that mindset to go into battle properly, not with fear, not with worry about what people think of us, not with, what's going to happen. And like you said, those guys that just love the doom and gloom, they're the prophets of doom. They love it. They're addicted to it. We don't need that. We need people that know we're going to win. And that's another thing I really do like about Trump and his approach to everything is his cavalier, I don't care. We're doing great. You guys keep trying to come out here and say it's all this, but no, we've got record this and record that. Whether you love Trump or not, take that one lesson of success, because that's one thing he is good at, and it is something the warrior tradition is good at. Take that into your quiver of arrows when you go into battle, and you'll see the result will be on your side. And I feel that people are getting bolder. I think because we've had our backs up against the wall for this past 7 months, people have had enough, and that is necessary. We needed to be brought to that level in order to really overthrow this tyranny. Because if we wouldn't have had this wake-up call with COVID and the lockdown, I honestly don't think we would have made it. I think the only reason we're going to be victorious is because we had to have everything but the kitchen sink thrown at us, and it's totally going to backfire. And I think that's a proper mindset going forward.
Well, and that's an awesome place to leave things. I feel this has been a landmark interview, Dave. This should be getting listened to in 100 years' time as a chronicle of these times and what it was like to be alive in 2020. I really hope it is. So thank you for your time today. Just before you go, do you want to let people know where they can find your work online and the regular shows that you do and all that stuff? Where would you like to direct people to?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Mark, thank you so much. You're an amazing guy. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I would like to publicly invite you to come on my show with me. We'll work the details out anytime. I'd love to chat with you and get your take on all this stuff.
Great.
But secondly, and also thank you to all the people that did stick around and listen to the end. Whether you're with me on all the points I brought up or not, I still love you. We're all in this together. And I hope you'll continue to support Mark's show. If you want to check out my work, everything's available at dwtruthwarrior.com. And my other website is unslaved.com. You can go check out those two websites, and that'll lead you to all my social media. I mostly haunt Instagram these days. But I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook. And we'll see how it all goes with the censorship. But even with the censorship, I just passed 10,000 follows on Instagram. And my channel's doing well. I'm glad to hear yours is as well, Mark. So, yeah, that's where you can find me. And I've got some really good interviews coming up. I'm going to be interviewing constitutional lawyer and total badass. This guy's amazing. And it's Rocco Galati. You got to go start looking him up. And he is actually levying a legal challenge against the Crown, the federal government, the provincial governments of Canada, and setting an example for the world. And I've been getting information from others that this type of action is being taken around the world as well in other places. So I'm going to be covering that coming up on my show. So thank you so much, Mark, for this time. It was a blast.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on today.
This is just for fun.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up